Բարև ձեզ վեբինարի հարգելի մասնակիցներ, ինչպես նաև Facebook-յան ուղիղ եթերով մեզ հետևողներ, խրախուսելով մեդիագրագիտության լավագույն պրակտիկան և հասանելի աղբյուրները նախադպրոցական կրթական հաստատությունների համար։ Սա է հանրային լրագրության ակումբի կողմից կազմակերպված այսօրվա վեբինարի թեման։ Մեր բանախոսը ամերիկացի մեդիափորձագետ, ԱՄՆ-ի Թեմփլի համալսարանի մեդիագրագիտության կենտրոնի ղեկավար Շերրի Քուլվերն են, ձեզ ևս ողջունում եմ տիկին Քուլվեր և շնորհակալ եմ մեզ միանալու համար։ Եվս մեկ անգամ հիշեցնեմ մեծ հետևողներին, որ հանրային լրագրության ակումբը դեռևս 2020 թվականի սեպտեմբերին մեկնարկել է ավելի անվտանգ առցանց միջավայր ծրագիրը, որն իրականացվում է ԱՄՆ դեսպանատան աջակցությամբ եւ մինչ խոսքը տիկին Քուլվերին փոխանցել է, ուզում եմ մեր մասնակիցներին խնդրել, որպեսզի ընթացքում հարցեր ունենալու դեպքում լինեն ակտիվ, դրանք գրեն եւ Facebook-յան ուղիղ եթերով մեզ հետևողները եւս կարող են գրել իրենց հարցերը, մենք դրանք անպայման կհնչեցնենք։ Շնորհակալ եմ։ Տիկին Քուլվեր, խոսքը փոխանցում եմ ձեզ, խնդրեմ։
Thank you. So I'm glad folks are joining us today and that many of you have joined in several of the webinars. And this is the last one that is going to be focusing on preschool teachers. And so really trying to give you lots of resources today and sort of recap some of the things that we've talked about. So I'm going to share my screen. Here we go. And I wanted to highlight one thing on this page that I'll show you later. This is just an overview of things that I'm involved in, books that I've written, groups that I work with. But there's also on the bottom, there are two covers from UNESCO publications. And there is a UNESCO publication that is on media and information literacy, and it's a teacher curriculum, and it's been translated into many, many languages. So I'm going to share my screen a little later and show it to you, but it's an available download and has lots of wonderful information on it. So our learning outcomes for today are to share effective media literacy resources and platforms for preschool educators, introduce a basic media literacy preschool curriculum and suggest methods for customization in your classes, and encourage the development of media literacy leaders among the education community. And just as a reminder also, I have two laptops in front of me. And so I'm sharing my screen with you so you can see it in Armenian, but I am looking at it in English besides. So that's why you see me going back and forth this way. And as Sophie mentioned, there will be many times opportunities for you to ask questions. And I have found that your questions have been very helpful in making sure that we're talking about the areas that are most important to you. So I will pause a couple of times in the presentation, and then we'll always make sure to leave time at the end as well. To make sure that we're all together, right, and really remembering the basic definition about media literacy is really thinking about media literacy and media and information literacy as an expanded form of literacy, right? And that if basic literacy is the ability to read and write, which is really consuming and authoring media, to be media literate is to be able to consume and author media in all the ways that we can consume and author media. And a more formalized definition comes from the National Association for Media Literacy Education that says the ability to access, analyze, evaluate, create, and then use all that information to act, right? Using all forms of communication. So depending on whether I'm talking to people who are interested in knowing a formal definition or not, I may use one definition or the other to try to help folks understand. And also to remember that I use the term media literacy, media and information literacy, and even some of these other forms of literacy, news literacy, digital literacy, advertising literacy. To me, those are all part of that MIL umbrella. So some folks, some educators, some researchers will focus in one particular area. And this question comes up all the time. I just was in a call yesterday with people from Lebanon, and it came up again. So I don't want you to think that it is something that you may be unsure about. It is frequently a question, sort of what is the difference? But the most umbrella term is media and information literacy. In the United States, folks use the term media literacy most often, and they mean media and information literacy, but they just use media literacy. But globally, MIL is the term that you hear most often. So today, really thinking about the fact that media literacy can be taught with access to digital technology in the classroom or without digital technology in the classroom. It also can be taught as a separate subject in the classroom or integrated with all subjects in the classroom. So I don't want you to feel like there's only one way to do it. If you have an opportunity to bring some conversation about media and information literacy into a classroom, into a conversation with your colleagues, a conversation with a school principal, any of those, I would do it. It's right. It is the best option if it can be incorporated in all grades across all classrooms in the school. But that is unusual. That does not happen a lot. So we try to bring it and introduce the concept as much as we can. And the last point is that I'm going to show you lots of resources today, and I want you to know that all of these resources are free. Unfortunately, almost all of these resources, fortunately or unfortunately, are in English. So if you speak English or you have access to someone who can help you with that, these are lots of resources in English. But but also there are places that if you are interested in helping to translate, people would be very happy to encourage that. They want to be able to share them. But the resources, all of the resources I'm showing you are free. So our first learning goal is to share effective media literacy resources and platforms useful for preschool educators. And actually, I'm going to just clarify one thing before I go forward. When I talked about the learning goals and the third goal was about developing leadership, I just want to mention that that section is going to focus on parents. That came up in some of our other webinars, and I had mentioned that was something I was going to focus on today. And so to me, part of that leadership is the leadership that comes from parents. Okay, so back to this learning goal. So this section is really looking at effective media literacy resources. So I'm going to actually stop sharing my PowerPoint, and instead I'm going to share my browser and show you a bunch of different resources that are available, and just sort of go through some of these. So NACCE is the National Association for the Education of Young Children. There's a lot of content on the NACCE website, but you'll notice that one of the tabs is for resources. And those resources there's a whole section about resources for young children and about teaching young children. They're really, it's considered a very highly respected organization in the US. And so this is a place where you can access those resources. And I'm just going to touch on a bunch of different ones here. I'm not going to stay on any one of them too long. This is the website for the National Association for Media Literacy Education. So this is a membership organization, but I will mention that membership is free. So if you join the National Association, and there are members from all over the world, I do work with Namely as well as a consultant, but there are members all over the world. And so you would automatically get an e-newsletter every month that has resources in it, and then find out about other events that are happening all around the world that have to do with media and information literacy. So there is a tab also on the Namely website that says resources. You click on resources, and you can find lots of different resources here as well. The next one I want to just briefly touch on is the Erickson Institute. And I've talked about the Erickson Institute's Technology and Early Childhood Center in previous webinars. We've looked at their framing for media literacy for young children. So they've got many reports. They tend to speak to a sort of a research audience, a sort of scholarly audience, but there are reports and resources that are available for everyone. And this is a report that I've mentioned several times. It is a free download from them. It's a short report about media literacy in early childhood. And so there's really useful tips. I've talked about some of the general approaches that they use, but if you actually get the report, it goes into real depth, but it's user-friendly, right? It's very approachable. It's not, I think it's a really good resource that has great information in it. Another resource is Common Sense Media. So Common Sense Media started in the US as a location for ratings on different media resources. And they provide ratings for almost every movie, television show, video game, book. They really have a tremendous assortment of recommendations, and they're written in a way, sometimes they have children who also will talk about it. But my main reason for going to Common Sense website right now is to show you this section, which is called Common Sense Education. So Common Sense education materials are not all free. Many of them are free, but they are not all free. They have a business where they go into schools and they work with schools to create a program for them. But lots of resources are available online on this site. And just to scroll through a minute to see, they have a section about digital citizenship, which includes lots of the things that we've talked about in webinars. And you can actually go in and, let me see if I can show you this. If you go into digital citizenship, right, it'll talk about cyberbullying and about media balance. You can look at particular lessons for kindergarten through preschool, early elementary, right, early primary school years, middle school and high school. So that's another resource for you. And all of that information is free as well. RAND is an organization that provides research around media literacy. So they do have reports that focus on early childhood and media literacy. So just another resource for you to check in. The Media Education Lab is out of the University of Rhode Island, and Renee Hobbs is the director there. They have a lot of resources on their website. So teaching resources is a tab they have, and there's books, there's also activities, and everything that's on here is free. This is the Fred Rogers Center. So the Fred Rogers was a beloved personality, television personality for Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood, was a preschool show that was on the air for many, many, many years. And he has since passed away, he has died, but there are resources that they are still developing, and they are all focused on early childhood. That is their singular focus, is early childhood. And then the last one I'm going to touch on is called Powerful Voices for Kids. And this was a project that was done at Temple University a number of years ago. The website is discoveringmedialiteracy.com, but the program is Powerful Voices for Kids. And you can sort of see the rotating slides here. There is a section about analyzing advertising, one about interpreting photos, one about public service announcements, PSAs, and all of this is focused on elementary ages, and it starts with early elementary and preschool. So this is a more hands-on for teachers website. It's another option there. Okay, I'm going to stop that and go back to the PowerPoint. So this PowerPoint contains I was, just in case I wasn't able to get online and show you that, I made sure that there were slides for each of these. So I'm just going to go forward. There's Mr. Rogers. And this was their recent report, Technology and Interactive Media for Young Children. So I thought that this was worth sharing with you, which is Fred, so that's Fred Rogers, Mr. Rogers, his tips, 6 principles of learning readiness that are most essential for a child to develop. So you'll notice that even though he is focused on media, he had a television program. Media is what they talk about. They encourage children to interact with media and talk about best practice. His principles of learning readiness are not about media at all. So what he's really doing, and what the Fred Rogers Center is focused on, is looking at what is most important to the positive development of a child, and how you create media spaces where that positive development can happen. And so in a preschool environment, his goals are his recommendation, right, is that a preschool space is teaching a child to have a strong sense of self-worth, that they learn to trust, right, that they are encouraged in their curiosity, that they are encouraged in that curiosity to learn to listen. So sort of balancing your own interests with listening to others, really focused on play and all learning for preschoolers through the lens of play, and then appreciating solitude, which would be also reflection, right? And that's something that when we've talked about media literacy in these webinars, always thinking about, when I think about analysis or balance, that is about that reflective use of media. So when I say that media is about consuming and authoring media and all the forms that we can consume and author it, the other piece of being a media literate person is reflecting on what that means to you, how it affects you, and what the kind of media you need to consume to be mindful of your needs. And that's part of what I want children to learn. They're not mature enough to make those decisions for themselves entirely, but we can encourage an environment that asks questions, right, which is the key piece, asking questions, and helping them to learn what it means to ask questions about their media use, so they grow up with that in mind. And this is a quote from the report that came out from the National Association for the Education of Young Children and the Fred Rogers Center together. And the quote is, "Early childhood educators should always use their knowledge of child development and effective practices to carefully and intentionally select and use technology and media if and when it serves healthy development, learning, creativity, interactions with others, and relationships." So they're highlighting the fact that we want children to engage with media, but only so much as it serves their overall child development and helps them to grow up to be healthy and curious and creative and have good relationships with other people. And there are ways to do that, but we don't, the opposite of that would be just putting a child in front of a television and saying, go watch for an hour, I'll come back. They want it to be, they're really encouraging interactive practice and what we call co-viewing, right? Co-viewing, co-watching, where you are engaged with a child and helping them to learn how to watch, how to engage with media. So the second learning goal is to introduce a media literacy preschool curriculum and methods for customization. And so, most of you who are, if not all of you who are preschool teachers, have developed curriculum of some sort. Some of you may have formal education in creating a curriculum, and some of you more informal. And so I thought it would be helpful to just take a moment and talk about what a curriculum of any kind, media literacy curriculum or otherwise, would include. And so the goal is for you to have a document that you can pick up, or a screen that you can look at, that includes all the instructions you need to be able to easily integrate a particular lesson into your day with children, right? So you need a title for that lesson, a name for the lesson, how much time you think you're going to need to accomplish that lesson from beginning to end. What materials will you need? Will you need books? Will you need construction paper? Will you need crayons? Will you need scissors? Will you need a whiteboard and screens? What are the needs you have? And specifically technology. Are there technology needs? What is the essential guiding question? With my older students, I always tell them what the essential guiding question is of a lesson. Younger students, I may not do that, but you as the teacher want to think about what is the reason, what is the core element that I want to communicate in this lesson? It's easy to get off track, right? Especially with young children and they're doing so many things and maybe someone has a question in a different area, but you want to always remember, I have a goal for this lesson that I want to come back to all the time. And so you have an essential guiding question and then goals beneath that, much like we did today. Our essential guiding question today was about establishing and talking about best practice. And then I had 4 learning goals for today. So those, to me, they're helpful for you, so you know what the path is of today's webinar, but it's also helpful for me as the teacher, as the presenter, because it keeps me on track. So I think that it's very helpful and worth the time. It takes time to develop these and really think them through, especially if it's media literacy and you haven't done that before, but it's really worthwhile because it will assure that you are getting the outcomes that you aim for. The next bullet says evidence of understanding. So how are you going to know that they learned what you wanted them to learn? If I had an opportunity in our webinars together, I would perhaps have wanted to have a survey before and a survey after, right? Ask you what you understood before and after, pre and post. But there's lots of ways you can do that. You can even just have conversations with your students and ask them ahead of time, what do they understand about a particular topic? And then ask at the end. Or you might not need to ask them anything ahead of time, and you might just want them to make something in the end, draw something that's reflective of what they've learned. So something that helps you know that they've actually achieved the learning you wanted them to learn. Then you're going to describe, so this is our curriculum layout. You're going to describe what those learning experiences and activities are, exactly what you want them to do. First, I'm going to ask them this question, then I'm going to engage them in a conversation about this topic. Then we're going to sit quietly for a few minutes and draw. I mean, you're going to lay out each step of that. And then you're also going to include this piece of reflection. That could be reflection that you want the students to do, but it's also, and perhaps most importantly, in this curriculum layout, is your own reflection. So in my classes that I teach, with my college students, after every class, I have a file, a digital file I go into, and I put notes in that file for the next time I teach it. And I actually have a document that's called Next Time I Teach This. And when I think of new ideas, or I'm reading something, I'm not in the classroom, I'm somewhere else, somebody mentions a topic, I find an interesting article, I put it in my Next Time I Teach This file. And then before the next semester begins, I go into that file and I look at all that again. So hopefully you will be preschool teachers for a long time. You want to learn so that you can keep changing and evolving. I'm always looking for new methods of technology to incorporate. This semester, I just started using Google Jamboards. I don't know if you're familiar with the Jamboard, but it's basically an interactive tool that Google offers that allows collaboration, collaboration with people in different locations. And it looks like sticky notes, like I had sticky notes around here somewhere. I don't know what happened to them, but those little notes that you can put all over. And so it does that digitally. So I'm always looking to incorporate new technology so that I'm not worried about it, right? I don't want to, if I don't try to incorporate something new every semester, always learning every semester, then I'll get nervous about trying something that could fail in the classroom that I don't know. And I don't want to feel that way. I always want to be bringing new ideas, new activities, new technology into the classroom. So that requires reflection on my part. I have also found that it doesn't work if I wait. If I teach something today, I do this webinar. When the webinar is over, I'm going to write notes about what I think I did well today, what went well and what did not. I often will jot down, in previous times, I've written down questions you've asked that we hadn't had an opportunity to touch on. I want to make sure that I'm always improving, and that requires reflection. So I want to encourage you to do that. So these are some basic media literacy topics. So if you're trying to develop curriculum and you want to, just hit some of the core elements of media and information literacy, these are themes that I would suggest. These are also themes that I went over in the third webinar. So there's much more detail about each of these themes in webinar number 3. I think it was webinar, wait, we're in 4. No, maybe it was 2. It was 2. It was webinar number 2. They're all coming together for me now. But you know what? You could, I'm sure you'll be able to find them. So the value of these themes is that they're a good jumping off point for you for something you might want to talk about. So they're a place to begin. They're not required topics. They're topics that I know will work in a preschool classroom. I know that preschoolers can understand these topics, and you can customize them in ways that work for your class. So one was, I'm just going to briefly touch on these. One is about authorship, right? Activities. So each one, I wrote the title of the lesson, and then I wrote one sentence under, just so you had a sense of what would happen in this lesson. So who is the author? Is going to build an understanding that media is created by a person or by people. Theme 2 is real or pretend, real or virtual, real or digital. Builds an understanding that media is created. 3, commercials and ads, builds an understanding of consumerism and that ads want us to buy something, right? Helping children to understand that. Number 4 is on off, building an understanding that we have the option when we want to consume media and when we don't want to consume media. Number 5, theme 5, creating your media rules. So building an understanding that we can make choices about our media use and we can have rules. We can make our own rules about those things. Even if we're young, we can make those rules. 6, what is media? It's really helping them to build an understanding that media includes lots of devices and technology. Yesterday, I was giving midterms to my university students this week, and I asked students to talk about the influences on a child other than media. And one of my students gave an example of something that had to do with books. And I wrote back and I said, yeah, books are media. So, it's sometimes people think of digital media only, right? Digital media would be computers and your laptop and video games and apps and things like that. But media includes books and magazines and radio and movies and music. Number 7, the theme is research and discovery, building an understanding of information literacy skills so that we are helping them to understand how you find information and where you find it. And theme 8 is critical thinking, which really is involved in all of it, building an understanding of how to analyze media content and asking those key questions. So for each of these, for any of these, and you could combine some of them as well, there are individual lessons that you could develop particular goals for, particular activities. And in the other webinar, I gave lots of ideas about how those activities could come together or how they could be developed. And then within each of these themes, so if you want to really get more detailed, within each one, you could talk about audiences and authorship, messages and meaning, representations and reality. Those are the big categories of critical thinking around media. This is a list that I thought would be very helpful. It was developed by Faith Rogo, who is a media literacy consultant in the US, and she focuses on early childhood education. And she had drafted a list of terms that are all terms that we know preschool children can learn and they're all media related. So these are, you could have a word of the day, you could have a word of the week, you could make sure that some of these words are integrated into the lesson plan. But this is a nice way, just even the word director, just talking about what a director does on a particular day, looking at engaging them in a conversation about some TV shows that they like to watch, and how does that get created, and just talking with them and having conversation about how television, what do they know about how TV is created, and then helping them to understand that there is a director, there's a person who is in charge of all of the visuals that we see and the actors and the dialogue. And some of these terms you might be more familiar with, and some you might feel like you need a little more information. So you might do some research so you can bring more of that learning into the classroom. But I think this is a helpful list when you're developing that curriculum. A great way to start a conversation with young people about media when you are planning a media literacy curriculum is to survey the children, survey the kids first. And by survey, it could be formal survey, or it could be an informal survey. You could ask them, and the kinds of questions I'm thinking of are, what are your favorite movies? What are your favorite television shows? When do you watch TV when you're home? Where do you watch TV when you're home? Do you have a computer in your home? How many computers in your home? Does the family watch television together? What shows does the family watch together? So the value of this is, first of all, it's a great, so you could send home a list of questions. Parents and children could talk about it together and bring some of the information back in. They can take pictures of their family doing that together at home, maybe share some of those pictures in the classroom. It will give you tremendous insight into the way to craft your media literacy curriculum. You'll get a sense of, you might think but it's often surprising that, I actually did an interview last week with two 12-year-old boys. It was two boys, 12 years old. And I think, if we all talk together and we said what we think 12-year-old boys are like and what they're probably listening to and watching, we might have come up with a list of things, right? You have whatever assumptions you think 12-year-old boys are doing. But these two boys could not have been more different. One boy was very formal and very mature, and is not on social media at all, does not like to watch a lot of television, and yet he is a media creator. He wants to be a director. He likes to make short films, but he doesn't spend a lot of time on media himself unless he's the creator. The other boy was chatty, and he loves K-pop, Korean pop music, and he likes anime, which is the Chinese like cartoon style, Japanese cartoon style. He's on social media all the time. He makes TikToks. He does not, other than making TikToks, he doesn't create content the way the other boy does at all. They could not have been more different. And it was so interesting to interview them both. So I really try not to assume anything about the children I'm talking to and give them an opportunity to talk. It's a great starting point. But the best place to really jump in after you get that information is the 5 key questions. Always come back to these 5 key questions. There's nothing that I do with media literacy where I don't incorporate these 5 key questions. I always come back to them. They ground me. They really ground me. They're a good place to begin. They're a good place to return to. They help to simplify conversations when the media literacy conversations are getting overly complex. They can simplify a curriculum. So there's a lot of value just thinking about the author, format, purpose, audience, and content. And so much of what I've already talked about aligns with those categories. This last section is about encouraging development of media literacy leaders. And actually, I'm going to stop there. I meant to stop a little bit earlier to see if there were questions, and I apologize I didn't stop before. But before I get to this, let me see if there are any questions about what we've been talking about, or I've been talking about.
Շնորհակալություն Տիկին Քուլվեր, այո, մեր մասնակիցներից մեկը ուզում է իր հարցը տալ։ Խնդրեմ Փարանձեմ Խանգելդյան, կարող եք ներկայանալ եւ տալ այն հարցը, որը ձեզ հետաքրքրում է։ Ես այս պահին որևէ ձայն չեմ լսում, հավանաբար տեխնիկական որևէ խնդիր ունի մեր մասնակիցը։ Ես կհնչեցնեմ այն հարցը, որ տվել է մեր մասնակիցը, հարցնում է, ինչ 3 կարևոր մեդիահմտություններ պետք է իմանա ըստ ձեզ մանկապարտեզն ավարտող երեխան։ Եվս մեկ անգամ կրկնեմ հարցը։ Մասնակիցը հարցնում է, ինչ 3 կարևոր մեդիահմտություններ պետք է իմանա ձեր կարծիքով մանկապարտեզն ավարտող երեխան։
So I'm not sure if you mean media, you said it was said to me as media use skills. So I'm not sure if you mean their actual hands-on use or how they think about it. So let me talk about both. I think that whether or not we talk to children about media, by the time they are six years old, they have put their hands on lots of media. They may not own it themselves, but their family probably has a television, a radio, they've probably seen movies, they're listening to music, there's probably a smartphone in the family, there's probably apps on that smartphone, they may have had video games that they play. There's a lot of media in that child's life. And so I think that's a good thing. Right? I think that that's part of the rich experiences that we want young children to have in all sorts of parts of their lives. And so that to me is good as long as there's parental or adult supervision with that. So I would even go so far as to say if a child is entering primary school and has not yet had an opportunity to play a video game or play an app, I would want to try to do that with them. I think that that's something that they would enjoy, and it's a good way for me as the adult to introduce it to them rather than having a friend introduce it to them. On the other hand, the cognitive piece, right? What are the 3 areas in that cognitive piece? I would go back to, this, because these are the basic concepts that I want a preschooler to understand. Right? I want them to understand this concept of authorship is key. And if you're asking me to even like not 8 of them, just 3 of them, I think understanding the concept of author, that all media is authored, all media is constructed, right? There are people behind the scenes that make decisions and create it for you for a purpose. That would be very, very, very important. And then the critical thinking piece would be the other one. So this concept of bringing your critical thinking to the media you consume, and that's about asking questions. So I think encouraging preschoolers to understand that it is good to ask questions about the media you consume. You can ask questions about how they made it, why they made it, who made it, when did they make it, but asking questions. How did it make me feel? How did it make my friend feel? Asking questions brings your critical thinking, and development of critical thinking is a skill that they're going to need to develop for all of their subject areas. So they should be learning to think about that with media as well. I hope that answered the question.
Շնորհակալ եմ։ Մեր մասնակիցներից Վարդուհի Գրիգորյանը եւս ունի հարց։ Խնդրեմ Վարդուհի, խնդրում եմ միացնել ձեր խոսափողը եւ տալ այն հարցը, որը ձեզ հետաքրքրում է։ Վարդուհի, դուք մեզ լսում եք, դուք եւս ցանկանում եք հարց տալ։
Այո, ինձ այնը չի լսվում, Սոֆիջան։
Ահա, այս պահին լսում եմ, խնդրեմ։
Ահա։ Ողջունում եմ բոլորիդ, շնորհակալություն ինձ այն տալու համար, Տիկին Քուլվեր ջան, ձեզ նույնպես ողջունում եմ, շատ հաճելի է ձեզ տեսնել։ Դուք մեկնաբանեցիք շատ հետաքրքիր ձևով ծնողի հետ աշխատանքը, ուսուցիչների կարևորությունը մեդիագրագիտության ուսումնառության հարցում, սակայն մի շատ կարևոր հարց ունեմ, քանի որ ես աշխատում եմ նախադպրոցական կրթական հաստատությունում եւ ձեր նշած 5-ից 6 տարեկաններին դպրոց անցմանն եմ ուղղորդում։ Հետևաբար շատ կարևոր է իմանալ որպես մանկավարժի, այսինքն հստակ կան չափորոշիչներ, որ գրվելու են մեդիագրագիտության համար, որ այսինքն իմ ուսումնառության 5-ից 6 տարեկանը ավարտելուց հետո ուղղորդել դպրոցին, թե պարզապես դա պիտի մնա միայն այս ինֆորմացիան մեզ մանկավարժներից այսպես հստակ կարևորելով մեր անելիքը մեդիագրագիտության ուղղությամբ, այսինքն մեր ստեղծագործական մոտեցումները, նաև հմտությունները պարապմունքների ժամանակ, թե կա հստակ չափորոշիչներ, որ այս ուսումնառությամբ մենք պետք է ճանապարհենք դեպի դպրոց։ Շնորհակալ։ Ձեզ հետ էր խոսում, ինչպես նշեցի, համարի նմանկապարտեզի ավագ խմբի դաստիարակ Վարդուհի Գրիգորյանը Տիկին Քուլվերը։
There are no, how do I say this? There is not a governing body that, government or regulatory body that says this is the way it needs to be done. The media literacy community is not like that, really. It's different in that way from, say, mathematics or language arts, right? In the US, there are core curriculum standards that start with, that are for K-12, core curriculum standards. And there are elements of what we're talking about that are embedded in those core curriculum standards, but not in kindergarten. It's really not until like 3rd or 4th grade. And they start talking about, and it's very specific. There'll be one section that's about news, one section that's about advertising, one section that's about persuasive speech. It's an unfortunate thing right now. I mean, we lobby quite a bit to try to get it incorporated into the core standards. So namely, actually, the National Association for Media Literacy Education actually has a document that is outlined where in the core curriculum standards they talk about media literacy, and I can get a link for everybody on that. But even then they don't really talk about preschool, and it's a newer focus. There was, for a long time, the feeling was that the conversation should start around middle school, that children were cognitively ready. They were mature enough, ready to have these kinds of critical thinking conversations when they got to middle school, and they were in the 11, 12, 13. But the more that media has become a pervasive element of all of our lives, the more children have screens in their lives from infants. the more we have worked to find appropriate ways to bring the media literacy conversation to young children. So you are at more of the cutting edge of what people are recognizing now needs to be developed. So, so I guess that's the challenge, is that it is not, you may find that it's not a formalized requirement, but you all know that children are using media all the time. And US too sometimes. It's something to read that so I understand the challenge for you, right? In that it would be helpful, right? It's helpful for teachers if they can say, it says here I have to do it, right? But it is a little, so that is challenging. The piece that I would remember here also is, in the beginning today, I said media literacy can be a separate topic, or it can be integrated into everything you already do. And that's what I would focus on. You are already spending time with students. You're probably having conversations, some of the conversations I've mentioned, with books already. Can you bring digital media into that? Can you take conversations where you're showing them a short film, or you are having them make their own little book? I mean, some of the activities I've talked about in prior webinars that don't require technology still enable you to talk about media literacy skills. So I would take advantage of those situations. I hope that was helpful. It's a tough question.
Շատ շնորհակալություն, ես լրիվ հասկացա, իհարկե դա էր ինձ համար ամենակարևորը, մանկավարժի ստեղծագործական միտքը տվյալ տեքստում։ Շատ շնորհակալություն, Տիկին։
Ձեզ ևս շնորհակալություն հարցը ուղղելու համար։ Տիկին Քուլվեր, կարծում եմ, որ Վարդու հարցը ինչ որ առումով նաև կապ ուներ ուսուցչի ունեցած անհատական ազատության հետ, ստեղծագործական ազատության հետ, եւ այս առումով հետաքրքիր է իմանալ, եթե օրինակ մեդիագրագիտությունը որպես առանձին առարկա է դասավանդվելու եւ ուսուցիչը որոշակի ծրագիր է, ուսումնական ծրագիր է մշակել, արդյոք նա ունի բավարար ազատություն այդ ծրագիրը միանգամից լսարանում կիրառելու եւ դասավանդելու հենց այդ ծրագրով, թե կա որոշակի ընթացակարգ այնուամենայնիվ, որ պետք է անցնի այս ծրագիրը, հաստատի եւ միայն դրանից հետո լսարանում կարողանան կիրառել։ Ինչպես է, ինչ է հուշում ԱՄՆ փորձը, ինչպես է այդտեղ ընթանում այս գործընթացը։
To a clarifying question, are you talking about the training of teachers, right? The training of teachers, or so how we are introducing it to teachers, or the teachers' freedom in their own classroom?
Ուսուցիչները ծրագիրը ներկայացնում են երեխաներին դասավանդելու համար։
So, you know, it is one of the joys and challenges of teaching that teachers have a lot of freedom often. Even a curriculum that is formally stated often doesn't exactly tell you what to do in the classroom. It says this is the goal. You must teach them that 2 and 2 equals 4. You must teach them that. But it doesn't actually say, so here's what you should do. Tomorrow, get your students together and do this. That is the teacher, that is the beauty and why teachers are so amazing. Preschool teachers, amazing. I think that actually being a preschool and a primary school teacher, like the most difficult job. I will just tell you that my sister was a primary school teacher for 26 years. And I have only been teaching for 15. I worked in the media business for a long time. And I knew that she taught, I knew that she worked hard. When I started teaching college, after my first semester, I called her one day and said, "Oh my goodness, I had no idea. Your job is crazy hard. I am teaching 2 or 3 classes in a day, and I have breaks in between. You are going from 7 in the morning until 3 with like a room of 30, 25 or 30 young children who all want a piece of you. And you're going from math to science to social studies to so difficult." So I bow to all of you. This is a very hard job. And it would be easier in some ways to bring it back to media literacy if someone gave you those really clear curriculum ideas. That's why I've tried to share those in some of the webinars, some real ideas that you can take into your room, creative ideas. And it's also a good reason to build a small cohort, like the group you're in now. If some of you stayed in touch, where you can share ideas and and figure out what's working in your communities, that can be really helpful to have someone else to talk to with that. Even when I go into a school to teach media literacy, I try to get a small cohort of teachers that are committed to it, so that the rest of the school knows that they're a resource for them. They have someone they can go to and talk to, and that can be very helpful. So the other piece of it in terms of my presentation here is I think that it has to be grounded in the cultural practices of the place where you're teaching. So the way that children interact with media, I'm sure there are lots of similarities between the way children interact with media all over the world, but there are also unique pieces about the way families gather, the way the foods that they're eating, the holidays you're celebrating, that need to be recognized in discussions around media. So I'm giving you ideas for things you can do, but you need to make them yours, right? For the things that your students are enjoying. That's why I suggest you survey the students, because if you find out that all the students or a lot of your students are fans of Star Wars, then when you introduce a concept about authors and all media is constructed, I would use Star Wars as the example. You want to ground it in the things that are important to your students, that will connect for them. That will make the learning stick, right?
Անչափ շնորհակալ եմ պատասխանի համար, Տիկին Քուլվեր, եւ իսկապես որ ուսուցիչների դերը շատ մեծ է եւ կարեւոր է, եւ ամեն վեբինարի ընթացքում իսկապես մեծ ուրախություն է տեսնել, որ ինչպես Երևանից, այդպես էլ Հայաստանի տարբեր մարզերից մեզ տարբեր ուսուցիչներ են միանում եւ կարող են այն գիտելիքը եւ ինֆորմացիան ստանալով այս վեբինարի ընթացքում կիրառել նաեւ իրենց դասարաններում։ Այս պահին այլ հարց կարծես թե չունենք, կարող ենք շարունակել եւ վերջում եթե կլինեն հարցեր, նորից կհնչեցնենք։
Ջան, մի հավելում ասեմ, այսօր իդեպ այդ մանկավարժը, ես ուզում եմ այսօր ծնողական ժողով հրավիրել, քանի որ on-line հարթակում է եւ անպայման խոսել մեդիագրագիտության մասին, հենց այդպես ստեղծագործաբար ծնողների հետ։
Դա միայն ողջունելի է, կարծում եմ։
That could be that's a great segue into my next section. So I'm going to go back and share my screen. Whoops, hang on. What just happened? Here we go. Okay, so in this section, thinking about the development, and I want to encourage you to think about it in this way. So we're going to talk about connecting parents. Mainly, I'm going to focus on parents, but thinking about parents, education leaders in the community, government leaders and civic leaders, and thinking of them as media literacy leaders. So how do you engage with these groups in the hopes of engaging them to become media literacy leaders? And there is probably no greater predictor of a child's media use and their media understanding and their media literacy skill than the parents' media use. Children that are in a home with parents that watch a lot of television grow up watching a lot of television. That's the norm. People that grow up in a home where parents are on their phones a lot, as soon as they get a phone, they tend to think that that's the way to do it, right? Children are looking to their parents to learn all sorts of things, media included. A difference might be that parents are often not conscious of their own media use. They don't really reflect on their own media use. So sometimes they do things with media in front of their children that if they really thought about it, they might not do. So that's what we're going to sort of tap into a little. And I wanted to remind you of something that I had mentioned at the last webinar in terms of how we introduce these topics to children. You know, when we're teaching children about, and how parents can do this, right? That's why I'm putting it right here. That when parents teach children about eating right, which is something that that most parents will do, is talk to them about in the beginning, right? Giving them the food that is most healthy for them, and then slowly teaching children the things they need to know so that ultimately they can cook for themselves, right? They learn little steps along the way. And it's the same thing we want parents to understand about media literacy. That's part of the the value of engaging with parents, is helping them to understand and modeling for them what it means to actually have a media literacy conversation with their infant, with their preschooler, with their primary school child, and that they can have those conversations all the way through. The challenge really happens when we wait. When parents don't have those conversations, and then they find they have a teenager who will never get off their phone, or a teenager who plays video games for too many hours every day, you know, or is constantly on social media. And, you know, I'll talk to parents, they'll just throw their hands up, oh, I don't know what to do. Well, I mean, there's still things you can do, but the time to begin was when they were much, much younger. So a child who's growing up in a home where media literacy has been talked about from the very beginning, when they've been encouraged to be mindful and think about their media from the very start. They have understood that there are family media rules from the very beginning. It's, of course, children are still teenagers. They're going to push back, but still, you will find that overall, it's a much healthier approach, and children are learning and able to integrate those rules into their lives much more fluidly than if we wait. We wouldn't wait to talk about nutrition until a child was 15, right? That would be crazy. They'd be eating junk food and fast food all the time. We help them through. So the things that parents are, that I hear parents concerned about, are the fact that children now have screens everywhere. There are screens at gas stations in the US. There are screens, you know, now children, you can buy a car, and like if I'm the driver, on the back of my car seat, there is an opportunity for there to be a screen back there, or to slip the tablet in a special holder so children can watch. So there's screens everywhere. Privacy issues, so children's private information getting out, cyberbullying, advertising, so manipulative advertising tactics, whether they get access to inappropriate content, sexual content, violent content, physical health effects. Parents worry about children just sitting, right, for long periods of time and accessing content. Are they developing poor in-person, face-to-face skills because they're texting all the time? There's a worry about that. And addiction, right? A couple of you have mentioned this in previous webinars about a concern about children being attached to their devices, right, for too much. So we could spend, you know, many webinars talking about each of these concepts. So I want to go through an easy way to think about what parents can do, and then I'm going to reconnect with that list of problem areas and see if there's anything we want to go back to. So I recognize that this works in English much better than it does in Armenian, but it's the 5 E's to think about. So it's explain, engage, empathize, educate, and empower. And we could say that even as educators, this is what we want to do, but this is really geared to parents, to really thinking about this for parents. So the first one is explain. And so that is about having conversation with your child about their media, about our engagement with media. So you really want to, it's not having conversations all the time of stop, right? Anytime someone's doing something they like, if your response is stop doing the thing you like, that person is not going to be happy. So we have to find different ways of having the conversation. So explaining means outlining your expectations, right? I will give you the phone. I think you can have it for the next 20 minutes and then that's it. You can have it for an hour, that's it. We explain. Talk about technology before you purchase it. So even if it's a family television, we might say, you know what, it's time for us to buy a TV for the living room, or it's time for us to buy a larger TV or a smaller TV for the living room. Let's talk about this as a family. Do we like the television that we have? Why should we get a new TV? You all understand that, we have a budget. We're not going to be able to just buy any TV. So you're engaging them in the idea that having access to technology requires thinking about that. Set guidelines and rules before you use it. Okay, we've got this new television now. Let's all talk about when we're going to use it and how we're going to use it. When do you get to turn it on? We're not going to turn it on in the morning, or we can turn it on for a few minutes to see the news. But we talk about it. Agree on tech-free spaces. So, and when I say agree, that means you're going to have to talk about it. It's not a parent saying, you cannot have technology in your room. That's not a conversation. It's actually sitting down as a family and saying, we think that, we as the adults in the family, we think that it would be good for us to have spaces in our house that we decide we're not going to have any technology. Where should those spaces be? Oh, maybe the bathroom should be one of those spaces. So you can have a conversation about it. Create a family media plan. Maybe the family together decides you can do whatever you want. Maybe the family decides together, you can watch whatever you want in the evenings, but we are all going to watch this one show together every Thursday night. That could be part of your family media plan. So it doesn't have to be restrictive, or it can. It doesn't have to come with punishment, but it could. It's what's right for your family. More than anything, it's the idea of having a media plan. That's what's in the explain. Be proactive about it, not reactive. Don't wait till things are bad. Talk about it beforehand. So that's explain. Second one is engage. So that means asking questions of your children and their media use. Oh, what do you do? Looks like you're playing a new game. What are you playing? Can you show that to me? Why do you like that game? What's great about it? How did you learn about it? Which friend told you about it? I know I've been hearing that lots of kids love to be on TikTok. Can you show me something fun that makes you laugh that's on TikTok? Ask questions, learn about their favorite apps. Ask questions about a movie as you're watching it. You can ask them about the plot. You can ask them about characters. You might be able to pause the movie, right? And ask a question. Ask kids to show you their favorite YouTube videos, their favorite TikTok videos, their favorite social media influencer. Now, obviously, we hope preschool children are not going to have some of those things, right? But you even then, you could together look at a couple funny TikTok videos and look at one or two, laugh about them together, and then say, all right, time to put it away. So you're actually engaging together in it, but you're also modeling, we turn it on, we turn it off, right? Play together online. Find ways that you can play with media online. Play a game, play an app, something simple that your child could actually do. But the idea that you're teaching and modeling for them is it's not always a solitary pursuit. It's engagement. So sometimes people my age, right, older people are thinking that it's a shame that children are doing all their communicating online. But to children, if you talk to kids about their media use, they feel that it's very fluid. Their friendships, that the people that they know in real life who are their friends and how they connect with them online, that's not a separation. To me, it's a big separation. I would rather see you in person, but to them, it's all very fluid. So we have to be careful we don't assume that they are not with their friends, not socializing. They feel they are. So your ability to play with them online is play. It's playtime. It's really valuable. Share details about the media that you like. Talk about the things. So you saw a new TikTok, or you were watching an influencer. You want to share something funny, or a new song that you want to hear, that you listen to. You could make content together, make a movie together, make a TikTok together. You could make a TikTok together and never post it, right? To make something funny that's like that, a short little funny video, and never share it with anybody but your immediate family. Limit the don't do this conversations, right? The next E is empathize. So remember, online engagement means kids they are often sharing in public spaces, and mistakes are often in public. When parents were kids, they could make their mistakes in private, in limited spaces. We need to show empathy for that. That's hard to navigate. Kids are going to make mistakes. It's hard to do. Adults make mistakes in this all the time. So we need to have sympathy for that, right? Empathize with them. Kids have to live with consequences of their poor media actions forever. I ask you, didn't all of you do something early in your life that if it had been on social media, that would have been a really bad thing? Luckily, social media was not around, or maybe it was not around for you and it wasn't online. So let's recognize that they're trying to navigate something that is difficult. Kids feel peer pressure to be online and to excel in online spaces. So that is, a child knows, even a young child, maybe not preschool particularly, but elementary, primary school, they already begin to know my friends are online and they're good at it. They know how to take a pretty picture. They know how to take a good selfie. They are skilled. So there's pressure to feel you are skilled. It can be difficult for adults to make good choices about privacy online. Imagine how difficult it is for kids. The next E is educate. Teach versus tell. Model healthy media habits. Learn how to engage in media literacy conversations at home, right? These are some things I've mentioned already. Imagine scenarios and talk about them before they happen. So you might even, you're going to let your child use the phone, use an app that's on the phone. And maybe before you give it to your preschooler, before you give it to them, you say, now I'm going to give it to you, and you can use it in this one game for a few minutes. But if you do more than I said, what do you think should happen? If you don't listen to me, and I find that you are taking this phone and playing at times we did not agree, what do you think should happen? And talk about that together. Share information about ratings. There are ratings on movies, on video games, also on all sorts of things. So on all sorts of media. And so as soon as they can understand that someone, the idea is that someone else has watched this or played this game and decided that it was okay for somebody your age. I think this is very important for young children with video games, because there are video games that are rated for everyone, and there are video games that are rated only for mature audiences or older children or teenagers. And why is that? Why would that be? Because of course, children, as soon as they understand ratings, are going to want to engage with things that are for older children, right? Children always want to do things for older children. So I've had conversations with young kids about, well, why do you think someone made that rule? What might be in that content that they don't think you should see? What kinds of things might adults not want you to see? And kids will often say things that are violent, things that are, they'll sometimes say inappropriate or things my mom doesn't want me to see. You're right. So we know your mom doesn't want you to see this. So when you see that rating, that's how you know to stay away. So you're helping them to understand that it's for their own good, right? It's something to help them. Notice and talk about the media in everyday life. When you're making a mobile phone, when you're making a phone call with your mobile device or your smartphone, when you're reading a book, when you're playing an interactive game, that you as the parent are actually like, look at me on my phone again, I need to put this down, right? Actually modeling the behavior. And empower. So encourage self-expression and fun with media. We want kids to recognize that we as parents, we know that it's fun. We want you to have fun with it. I want you to just do it with eyes wide open is what I usually say, right? I don't want you, when I talk to parent groups, I usually begin by saying, you should know something right off the bat. I am not here to tell your children to engage with media less. I think media is wonderful. I think people learn amazing things through media. They have fun times with media. They make friends through media. That's not the goal. The goal is for us to learn how to use media that's right for me, and for me to engage with media eyes wide open, not without thinking. That's my goal. So I want to empower, share information about new apps when you get a new app, when you look at a new video. Sign your kids up for classes, how to make a website, how to code, how to take beautiful photos. I mean, there's all sorts of things, or do that, go out. I mean, a preschooler can definitely do this. You could have a photography day with a parent where you go out during the day. We're going to take pretty pictures today. I take a picture, you take a picture. I take a picture, you take a picture. You know, when I was a kid, every time we took a picture, the film had to be developed. It cost a lot of money to do that. I was never allowed to take pictures. That was a big deal to be able to take pictures. But now my daughter grew up with a really good composition eye, as do many children, because they take thousands of pictures. It doesn't cost anything. That's something parents can do together. Connect the dots. Show how an interest in something online can lead to action and activities in real life. So it's the back and forth, the connecting of it. Oh, we watched that, or we saw a pretty location, or we saw somebody with a scarf on. I wonder if we could find that scarf in real life. Or how could we wear our scarves like that? Or can we go to the place that we saw this location? Could we go to that location? Connect the dots between what's online and what's in real life. Or the other way around, have something that happens in real life. Suggest online research to deepen knowledge about a favorite topic. So they walk outside and, or they're going to visit a friend and the friend has a cat and you don't have a cat. Can we do research about cats? Let's find out what we need to know about cats before you go to a house of cats. How would we find out more information? Let's go online. So you work with them, trust them, be there, right? Be present with their media. You know, we really want parents to engage with children's media, not allow, it gets harder and harder as children get older, but trying to not allow children to have media, digital media in their, if they have a room to themselves, to not have digital media in their room with themselves, but keeping it in a family open public area. So there is a website from PBS Kids, which is a network in the US that's a website for parents. Many of the educational programs that kids can watch on television have a parent guide that goes along with it. So if you are getting any US educational content, it definitely has a parent guide connected to it. And it's almost like a curriculum that I was talking about earlier. It'll say to parents, when you're watching this show, ask these questions. That's also something that consultants can develop. Like if there's a really popular show for kids in Armenia, somebody could actually develop a parent guide that goes along with that. Or if there's a public service broadcaster, they might have something like that. What I don't want you to do is just, oh my God, I don't know how to do this. It's too much, like, right? Don't get overwhelmed with all of it. Even to hold on to the parents for a minute, because the one piece I didn't mention there, I guess I'll add, is sort of how do you make, as teachers, how do you make the connection with parents? So I don't know if you have, in the US, they always have a back to school night, right? There's a night where early in, let's say in September, whenever the children are coming in, soon after that, there's an evening when all the parents come to school and they meet with the teacher, and the teacher talks about what they're going to be learning this year. That's a great moment to be helping the parents understand what media literacy is. I would actually explain the 5 key questions. I would make sure they would know a definition and the 5 key questions. And so that's something that you can engage parents with. Let them know from the very beginning. If it doesn't work that way in your school, then you could have a particular time where maybe that survey is a good moment, where you can send something home with kids that lets the parents know we're about to embark on this media literacy curriculum and we'd love you to participate, and give them some activities to do as well. I'm invited often to go to schools and talk to the parents. So there'll be a parent night, and either the school or there's sometimes a parent teacher association, they'll send a notice out to parents, and then parents come in and I do a presentation and basically field a lot of questions from parents about how to work with their kids and their media, and all the questions that you probably have too. So there's lots of ways to do that. I think it's beginning to help parents understand that they are key. They are key. So I want to go back. This was actually the first webinar ended by talking about embrace, launch, and lead. And I want to come back to that because these steps apply for all of the things that we've talked about. I want you first to think about your own media use, what you like about it, how you engage with it, and how you can use that involvement as your starting point for being media literate yourself and bringing it to your students. Then launch. Try something all the time. Give yourself a goal. I'm going to try some media literacy activity once a week, once a month, once every 3 months. Pick some time that you're going to really integrate some media literacy lesson in there. Can you integrate, bring parents into it? But launching, launch is really about classroom, having some conversation with kids about media literacy in the classroom and pushing yourself to do that. And then the last one is lead, right? So how can you be a leader in your community? You've all now participated in this. You will be hopefully watching, if you haven't already, watching all the webinars. You will hopefully be reading more about it. How can you take what you have learned now and share it with one other person, one other teacher who's not here, a friend, a colleague? If you're a parent, can you talk to other parents? Could you get parents together and have some conversation? Or casually, when you talk about what you've been doing lately, mention that you've learned something about media literacy. How can you broaden the circles so that more people are knowledgeable and involved in media literacy? That will make your ability to do it in a classroom that much easier. We need to involve all of these groups, right? All of these groups, because that's what really that will strengthen media literacy overall, the media literacy practice. A reminder that there's a conference that's coming up in July that's online that you could access if you were interested. And that's through Namely. And then there's my contact information. So please feel free to reach out. My email address is on there, my website, my Instagram and Twitter. You've got all of my socials on there as well. And I would love to hear from you. And so we do have a few minutes to take some more questions, and I hope you do have more questions.
Շնորհակալ եմ Տիկին Քուլվեր, այո, մեր մասնակիցները բավականին ակտիվորեն տարբեր իրավիճակներ են նկարագրում, պատմում այն մեթոդների մասին, որ կիրառում են իրենց դասարաններում, եւ հետաքրքրական է, որ նրանք խոսում են հեռավար ուսուցման մասին, նշելով, որ շատերը համավարակը բացասական լույսի ներքո են ընկալում, բայց շատերին հեռավար ուսուցումը թույլ է տվել նաև առցանց դասընթացներ վարել ինչպես երեխաների, այնպես էլ ծնողների հետ, եւ սա թույլ է տվել, որպեսզի համագործակցություն լինի ծնողների եւ ուսուցիչների միջև, եւ սրան զուգահեռ իհարկե մեր ուսուցիչներից ոմանք էլ նշում են, որ երբ նրանք որոշակի կանոններ են սահմանում դասարանում, մեդիայի կիրառման, երեխաները կարծես ընդդիմանում են եւ ասում են, որ իրենց ծնողը թույլ է տալիս սա անել, թույլ է տալիս այսքան ժամանակ անցկացնել եւ այստեղ որոշակի խնդիրներ են առաջանում։ Կարծում եմ, ինչպես որ դուք արդեն նշեցիք, պարզապես պետք է համագործակցության եզրեր գտնել եւ ցույց տալ ծնողներին, թե որքան կարեւոր է ծնողներ, ուսուցիչներ եւ երեխաներ համագործակցությունը մեդիագրագիտության ուսուցման հարցում։ Եվ գալով հեռավար կրթությանը եւս մեկ հարց կուզեի ուղղել, համավարակի սկզբնական շրջանում ուսումնական հաստատություններում կրթությունը սկսեցին հեռավար կրթությունը սկսվեց եւ եթե դպրոցներում եւ համալսարաններում սա ավելի համակարգված էր, մանկապարտեզներում սա որոշակի առումով խնդրահարույց էր։ Կուզեի իմանալ ինչպիսին էր իրավիճակը Ամերիկայի Միացյալ Նահանգներում, արդյոք որոշակի մարտահրավերներ կային ուսուցման առումով եւ որքանով էր կրթությունը արդյունավետ այդ շրջանում։
Yeah, I am sure that we all share a very strong desire to be back in classrooms in person with students. And perhaps no one, although it was challenging for many people, I don't think that the teaching could not have been more difficult, or how do I say this? The teachers who had it the hardest were preschool teachers and early elementary teachers, because after, trying to not have our children on screens all the time, we basically plunked them in front of a screen and said, this is the only place you're going to be, is in front of the screen. And it's incredibly difficult, absolutely. In the US, so I had taught online a little bit on and off for the last 15 years. So for me personally, I was used to teaching online, but I watched my colleagues, so college professors, as well as teachers at all different levels, be extremely unhappy and having to learn everything about what it means to teach online. And we don't have time to go into a lot of detail about it, but I'll just say that it required many preschool teachers to figure out how to keep children's attention and how to take their curriculum activities and somehow translate them into a screen environment. And it's extremely difficult because there was really no lead time, right? It wasn't like someone said to you, next year, we're going to do this online. It was like, tomorrow, it's going to happen. So it was extremely challenging for folks. On the other hand, many people have figured out much better practices for being online. We understand that even if you're in college, you cannot have a 3-hour lecture. It's not, people are exhausted. It's difficult. What we are doing here is probably the most time. Even this takes incredible focus from adults to really be attentive for an hour and a half online. That's a lot. So short bursts, we learned that short bursts were really important. We learned really the importance of having that adult caregiver in person with the child, right? Which somebody already mentioned about seeing the parents when the children were just trying to get on screen together, teaching them what it means to focus on that screen. But I think that the next challenge that's going to come about really is, once we've spent a lot of energy trying to get children to learn on screen, and now we're going to have to try to impart a very subtle distinction, which is, it was okay to do it then, but now that we're back in school, you can't be watching the screens all the time. And I think that's going to take some time to figure out how we introduce that, particularly for our youngest students, right, who are not separating all these pieces, right? If I'm talking to college students, even though they're online all day, they intellectually, they know I was doing this for pleasure, and then I did classes, then I had homework, they can separate it. but young children are seeing just, it's all the same thing, right? It's all screens together. So something that parents can do is actually help to make that separation, help them to understand the separation, what it means to take breaks in that, or to doing different things, even if it's just going to have lunch and coming back. So that modeling from parents becomes, vitally important when all of their engagement with media now is happening in a home with parents. To the point earlier about Sophie had mentioned that someone, I guess, put in chat the challenge of trying to make rules in the classroom and parents saying, a child saying, I'm allowed to do this at home. So this whole idea of, classroom rules, right? What happens in your classroom? Even beyond media, this is something that you can do at the beginning of the year about any topic, right? I actually talk to my classes often about a bubble. We talk about bubbles and what bubbles are like. And I want to create a bubble in here. I want a bubble where we recognize that bubbles are like, they can pop easily, right? But I want to create a space where when we're in the bubble, we're protected and it's our space. It's like our cool little space. So what do we want to make special about our space? How are we going to treat, I don't do this with my students, but I'm saying for preschool, how do we treat each other? How do we access games in the room? How do we access media? How do we, various rules we want to put to make our bubble so special. My daughter's first grade teacher had her thing that she used to do was she gave a name to each class that she had every year. My daughter's class name was the most awesome class ever. That was their name. And whenever she wrote to send things home, she said, I need to write to you about the most awesome class ever. And when she talked to the kids, she said, come on, most awesome class ever. She gave them a title and she had a different title for each year, but it was always something really positive and uplifting. So how do you create that bubble so that they understand when we're here, it's different, it's special. This is our special place. We have rules here. We don't now, so that's one way of doing that. The other thing I would suggest is that's all the more reason to have that meeting with parents at the very beginning of the school year so that you can engage with parents about the way you're going to create rules in your classroom, and that media is going to be one of those spaces that you're going to create rules. And those rules are going to be about time, where they use it, how they use it, when they use it, and you want to encourage them to do the same thing at home. So that's a conversation you can enter into with them. I'm just looking at there's actually something in the chat in English, so I'm like glancing over there. Yeah, I do think that parents overall have an appreciation of preschool and primary school teachers and at a level that they never had before due to the pandemic. And that's a good thing. I think that they were happy there were teachers, they were glad kids were going to school, but now they understand it in a much more personal, visceral level. And that hopefully will be a positive going forward in their education overall.
Շնորհակալ եմ եւ ուզում եմ հիշեցնել, որ ավելի անվտանգ առցանց միջավայր ծրագրի շրջանակներում նաեւ հետազոտություն է իրականացվում եւ մեր հետազոտողը ունի նման հարց. Նախադպրոցական նոր չափորոշիչով մինչև 6 տարեկան երեխան պետք է կարողանա օգտագործել տարբեր մեդիա գործիքներ եւ սա դառնում է պահանջ բոլոր մանկապարտեզների համար։ Արդյոք ճիշտ է դա պարտադիր դարձնել այս տարիքում, թե ավելի ճիշտ է թողնել մանկապարտեզի, ուսուցչի եւ ծնողի հայեցողությանը, եւ նա նշում է նաեւ, որ կան մանկապարտեզներ եւ կան մասնագետներ, որոնք ընդհանրապես դեմ են այս տարիքում որևէ տեխնոլոգիայի կիրառությանը։
Right. I think there's two issues around this. One is about the creating rules that would go against teachers or parents, and the other is the economic reality of that goal. So let me talk about the economics first. You know, we can have a goal that it would be really positive if by the time students entered first grade, they'd had some experience, had their hands on, had some positive experience with an adult with lots of different forms of media. But these things are expensive and not everybody has access to them. So I think we have to be very mindful about, there's a difference between creating opportunities where children can use those forms of technology and requiring it. So I would be very careful about a requirement because there are many reasons why people choose to or choose not to or are able to access media. The message I think is important is, or let's say more important, is that there are positives that come out of that. That I think that there are parents that would like to maybe play a video game or have their children have a video game or read a book through an ebook or play with an app and are worried about engaging with media too young. I need to really be careful. I need to protect them. And the opposite message is, excuse me, is it can be valuable to them. It can help them learn about other things and engage as long as you do this in a media literacy way, media literate way. So we want to open it up to people who can do it and encourage the positive use of it and the thoughtful use of it, but not, I would just be careful about the requirement.
Եվս մեկ անգամ ուզում շնորհակալություն հայտնել Տիկին Քուլվերին, ինչպես նաև շնորհակալություն հայտնել մեր բոլոր մասնակիցներին, ովքեր միանում են, լսում են եւ վստահաբար հետո կարողանալու են այս բոլոր գիտելիքները կիրառել նաև իրենց դասարաններում։ Մեր մասնակիցներից շատերը այստեղ գրում են հայերենով, ձեզ համար ուզում եմ նշել, որ բոլորը շնորհակալություն են հայտնում եւ ասում, որ վեբինարն իսկապես արդյունավետ է եւ որ իրենք արդեն իսկ կարողացել են որոշակի կանոններ մշակել եւ դրանք կարող են նաև իրենց դասարաններում օգտագործել։
Կարելի է Սոֆի ջան, մի բան, ձերքը բարձրացնում կարծես չի լսվում։
Խնդրեմ, իհարկե։
Ես ինչ որ բերումով աշխատում եմ եւ դպրոցում եւ մանկապարտեզում եւ ձեր այստեղ հնչեցրած բոլոր հարցերի հետ համամիտ եմ եւ ուզում եմ Տիկին Քուլվերին էլ ասել, որ իսկապես այն ինչ որ հենց սկզբնական շրջանում սիրելի մանկավարժներ մեզ համար նորություն է, կարծես թե դժվարությամբ ենք ընկալում, բայց ինչպես նշեց Տիկին Քուլվերը, օրինակ հեռավար անցնելու ժամանակ իսկապես շատ դժվար էր մեզ համար ուսուցիչներից հեռավար դասեր անցկացնելը։ Անձամբ ես բավականին մեծ տարիք ունեմ, Տիկին Քուլվեր 65-66 տարեկան եմ, այնուամենայնիվ ես էի փնտրում, գտնում ելքեր, ինչպես գրատախտակը օգտագործեմ, ինչպես փորձեմ հարցեր գրել, ինչպես գրավոր աշխատանքներ ձեռք բերեմ, եւ պատկերացրեք, որ մանկապարտեզում էր բավականին ժամանակ, երբ որ այդ համաճարակի համար փակվեցին մանկապարտեզները, ես կոնկրետ իմ դասերակների հետ փնտրում էի ելքեր, որ կարողանամ այն ինչ որ դպրոցում ինքնուրույն ձեռք բերեցի, մանկապարտեզում էլ ավակ մանկավարժն, որ փոխանցեմ նրանց եւ այդ փորձը իրոք ստացվում էր, հաջող էր։ Եվ ասում ես, այն ինչ որ նախկինում համարվում էր չի կարելիների մեջ շարք, չի կարելի օգտվել հեռախոսից, չի կարելի օգտվել համակարգչից, հիմա մենք զգում ենք, որ արդեն իսկ ես երբ որ նայում եմ դպրոց մանկապարտեզ կապին, մենք այո պատրաստում ենք երեխաներին դպրոցական կրթությանը։ Այդ իսկ պատճառով փորձում ենք նաև հեշտացնել, պարզաբանել, չգիտեմ, ուզում եմ շնորհակալություն հայտնել ձեզ, իսկապես շատ ուսանելի վեբինարեր, նաև ձեզ Սոֆի ջան, այստեղ էլ ես չաթում գրեցի, որ դուք հնչեցնում եք հարցեր, որ մինչև մենք մտածում ենք, որ ինչ որ մի բան կարող ենք հնչեցնել, կարծես մեր հենց մտքի հարցերը դուք ինքներդ պարզաբանում եք։ Շնորհակալություն ձեզ, ես կարծում եմ, որ կարողանանք սա էլ հաղթահարել, սիրելի մանկավարժներ, քանի որ սա իրոք ներառված է չափորոշիչների մեջ, պիտի կարողանանք այս դժվարություններն էլ հաղթահարենք եւ գիտեմ, որ կհաղթահարենք։ Շնորհակալություն։
Ներողություն անհամեստությանս համար իլերացումն անեմ մեր հարգարժան մանկավարժին, իդեպ ասեմ այս նորարարական մեթոդը, որ կիրառվեց ես ինքս նախադպրոցական տարիքի երեխաների հետ, իդեպ ասեմ առաջին
Վարդուհի ջան, որ ընդհատում եմ քեզ։
Այո, ուզում եմ ասել, առաջին մեկ շաբաթն էր, որպես այդպիսին կիրառելիք, ասեմ 5 տարեկան երեխաները, երբ որ ես արդեն պետք է իրենց ուղղորդեի դպրոց, ամեն օր դասի կերպով մենք միանում էինք, բախշեցինք դասացուցակի պես, այսպես դասերը, եւ երեխաները Չէ, ուզում եմ ասեմ, կարողանում են երեխաները ավելի արագ վերցրեցին, տատիկներին ուղղորդեցին, պապիկներին ուղղորդեցին, երբ որ ծնողները աշխատանքի էին, իրենք արդեն գիտեին, թե ինչպես օգտագործեն, դասին որ ժամին միանան, եւ Zoom արդեն որ մնում էր մի քանի րոպե, ասում էին, ընկեր Վարդուհի, արդեն մեր դասն ավարտվում է, մենք մեր աշխատանքները կուղարկենք։ Ուզում եմ ասեմ, միգուցե մեզ կթվա, թե երեխաները այդ նոր տեխնոլոգիաներին չեն կարող տիրապետել, ես այստեղ ասեմ, որ մենք նույնիսկ միջոցառումներ արեցինք, այդպես ավարտական հանդես ունեցանք եւ այդպես շատ հետաքրքիր անցավ ու բոլորը ապշած էին, որ դպրոցներում նույնիսկ չէին միանում, 5-ից 6 տարեկանները միացան ու մենք ավարտեցինք այդպես։ Այնպես որ
ես կարծում եմ հիմա այստեղ եղած բոլոր մանկավարժներն էլ յուրաքանչյուրս իրոք փորձել ենք այդ ամեն ինչը անել եւ կարծում եմ որ բոլոր ներկաներն էլ ինչ որ բան արել են եւ
ես իմ փորձը դեսեցի որ
շնորհակալություն
Սիրելի ուսուցիչներ, շնորհակալություն քննարկման եւ ձեր տեսակետները մեզ հետ կիսելու հետ, անչափ շնորհակալ եմ։ Եվ քանի որ սա վերջին վեբինարն է, Տիկին Քուլվեր, եթե կա որևէ բան, որը կուզեք հավելել, մինչ ամփոփելը, ընտրեմ։
Oh my goodness, I feel like we could have so many more conversations about these things in detail. First of all, I applaud you, both of you, and I'm sure many others who have already started to do this. That's incredible news. It makes me very excited to hear that. I also think about, parents, they are a key here. And unfortunately, lots of adults have bad media habits. So the ability to engage parents about their own media use through an activity that you want them to do for their kids is a good way for them to bring that media literacy conversation home, right? Because one of the goals is you don't want it to just be a conversation at school. You want it to happen at home as well. So I know we don't have time now, but really thinking about how parents can be engaged and encouraged to reflect on their own habits in a way that doesn't anger them, which I know can be difficult to do. But anyway, I so appreciate all of your attention and your interest in this topic. It makes me so happy to see how many preschool teachers in Armenia are interested in this. This has been amazing. And I want you to just go forth and try things. And it's okay if they bomb, if they're awful, go back and do it again. Just try again. Kids are very forgiving, especially young ones. And good luck with all of it. Thank you so much for your attention. It's been my pleasure.
Ձեզ եւս շնորհակալություն, ինչպես նաեւ մասնակիցներին շնորհակալություն։ Ես ուզում եմ հիշեցնել, որ այսօրվա մեր վեբինարի թեման էր խրախուսելով մեդիագրագիտության լավագույն պրակտիկան եւ հասանելի աղբյուրները նախադպրոցական կրթական հաստատությունների համար։ Մեր բանախոսը ամերիկացի մեդիափորձագետ, ԱՄՆ-ի Թեմփլի համալսարանի մեդիագրագիտության կենտրոնի ղեկավար Շերրի Քուլվերն էր եւ վստահաբար այս վեբինարների ընթացքում նա ներկայացրել է բազմաթիվ հնարքներ, աղբյուրներ, որոնք վստահ ենք, որ կկարողանաք կիրառել նաև ձեր դասարաններում, լսաններում։ Շնորհակալություն։